Welcome to the 27. Today we'll be discussing my custom setup for the Porsche GT1 at Silverstone 2001 using these race conditions, so stay tuned. Three things I wanted to point out before we get into the thick of things here. First, I wanted to mention how excited I was to take my first deep dive into the GT1s. It's an exciting category of car. We found some major ticket items to be aware of, especially with the Porsche. Second, with the release of the championship mode, these builds will be relevant for single player and multiplayer alike, and that's really great. So we're going to be kind of focusing around these tracks for now. In this category, GT3. This is my first attempt at a historic track that I had to quote unquote learn. um, a little bit of familiarity with the driving may show, but the setups are sound. It's sort of like, hey, that reminded me of Maggots and Beckett's. Oh wait, that was Maggots and Beckett's. Finally, there has been some growing underlying discontent with the default setups, including the Porsche with AMS2. Combine that with the fact that in this sim racing era, drivers expect track-specific setups. I wanted to say I feel an extra impetus to do this right for anyone that's watching this. So I am virtually building these setups from scratch. I use them. They're for me. It's not just tweaks or variations. I also slightly feel like I'm protecting the game in a weird way, and I'm relatively vocal about that. So if I can provide that spark of hope for you, so that you don't feel frustrated and uninstall, that's a win for everybody. All right, let's talk about the Porsche here. I mentioned major ticket items before, and what I meant by that is the brakes. The default brakes for the Porsche are extremely sensitive in both bias and pressure. And as far as I know, it's the number one fix for the car. It's the thing that you're going to notice the most driving the default, and it may drive you crazy, make you stop wanting to race the car. The 72% front and 70% pressure in my setup is going to look very weird to you. It's not a joke. Trust me, I've checked this with telemetry. It boggled my mind too. This being an aero type car, we had to set it up for the lowest possible speed braking zone, even though it might be a few clicks forward for the high speed sections. But this car really locks up. That being said, this you can play with a little bit as you get more comfortable. Lockups are going to happen. It's 50% driver and 50% brake pressure. Think of it that way. So play with it for your own comfort. In particular, the ducting has been adjusted where I feel we can cool the brakes and the core temperature up the fronts because we're really putting a lot more pressure on them with this build. Next, we added rake to this car to improve its aero package at top speed. I'm seeing a common theme for cars in AMS2. At the high speed straights, there's a negative rake footprint. So basically the front is higher than the rear, but when we add rake, with that comes with a certain degree of oversteer and instability through all phases of the corner. So the suspension was stiffened in the front and softened in the rear, both springs and ARBs. If it had understeer issues before, it most certainly does not now. This also neutralized the balance mid-corner, so that's a good thing. It's a goal. When the car is at max grip and the high-speed turns on this track, the car will feel like it's sliding, but not necessarily getting out of shape doing so. It's an amazing feeling. You will need to feather the throttle, though, when you're pushing, so keep that in mind. Another thing to point out about the ride height, it can get squirrely in traffic around high-speed corners, so I raised the overall ride height, but you're going to have to anticipate a sudden occasional slight loss of grip during a race in traffic. But I reduced the rear wing a click too. You may ask why. It's because the car didn't need 6. The center of pressure was fine without it, and virtually no usable downforce was lost. It's kind of normal, actually, to reduce rear wing when you increase rake. The car itself acts as its own wing, so to speak. The differential I locked 20 degrees in the front and the back. More power wasn't really necessary. The coast just helps with stability through the corner. They are still relatively open though. The tire temp at Silverstone 2001 at 45C was a factor. 3 of the 4 default tires were under pressured, which will only add more heat, marginal grip, sloppy feeling, and more rolling resistance. So go with these pressures. You could add a touch of toe to the rear. I reduced it all if you feel it's a little bit slidey. But other than that, the toe set, the cambers and pressures were set perfectly for the contact batch. That's simple enough. Watch my basic setup tutorial. The dampers in the GT1 are pretty simple. They're only two-way dampers, so I balanced the fronts and the rears. I also softened the rears a little bit to give you a little extra added traction on exit. And finally, yes, oh yes, here's the golden ticket to multiplayer, guys. We can adjust the gearing on GT1s, which means optimal acceleration. Most people don't do this. Particularly, we did this through from second through sixth. You're now in the power band, which is from what I recall, 65 or 6.5K to 8K, and peak power remains up to the limiter on the Porsche. So as high as you can go as high as you want without hitting the limiter, and you're fine. So great. That's the Porsche 911 GT1 98 at Silverstone 2001. I hope you enjoyed the build. I posted a class world record with a time of 141.584. That's not going to last very long. And if you can beat this time by February 1st, leave a comment or email me at steelcast27@gmail.com, and I'll send you my Imola GT3 track bundle, which includes all of my exclusive setups for GT3s. In the meantime, thanks again for watching. Take care.